this is now starting to sink into the mainstream media that the Saudis are doing the exact same thing they did in November of 2020 and in November of 2022. November was just, the kind of the peak of the oil prices. Actually, they didn't do it in November 2020 because Trump was president. But in November of 2022, they jacked up oil prices, and you saw oil prices going up. And remember the stickers that people were putting on pumps of Joe Biden? I did that, pointing to the price and all that kind of stuff. Well, Saudi Arabia and Russia agreed Tuesday, this day before yesterday, to extend their voluntary oil production cuts through the end of this year, trimming 1.3 million barrels of crude out of the global market and boosting energy prices. It's 1 million barrels a day out of Saudi Arabia, 300,000 barrels a day out of Russia. That immediately pushed the benchmark crude price above $90 a barrel. And Brent had already hovered between $75 and $85 a barrel since last October. Jake Sullivan, the White House National Security Advisor, was asked about this. He declined to comment. But Jorge Leon, a senior vice president at Rystad Energy, said, and I quote, the impact these cuts will have on inflation and economic policy in the West is hard to predict, but higher oil prices will only increase the likelihood of more fiscal tightening, especially in the U.S., to curtail inflation. Right. Biden had campaigned on the promise of making Crown Prince Salman, Mohammed bin Salman, a pariah over killing Khashoggi, you'll recall. And the Crown Prince is getting his revenge. The question is, are Americans going to fall for this? I think they will. I really do. I don't think most Americans are paying attention to the subtleties of this. Raising oil prices is going to increase inflation right across the board. Guess who's going to get blamed for that? Joe Biden. The increase in inflation is going to cause the Fed to increase interest rates further, which will further suppress the economy or depress the economy. You know who's going to get blamed for that? Won't be Jerome Powell. It'll be Joe Biden. These guys, Putin and Salman, they desperately want Donald Trump back in the White House. They were so happy that for 4 years we had a president who was down with all the authoritarians in the world. He was so happy when he was hanging out with dictators. Trump loved Kim Jong-un. He loved Vladimir Putin. He loved Jair Bolsonaro. He hated our allies because Trump is Putin's man. Or boy. I mean, Trump is the guy that Putin owns, and Putin wants him back. And Trump is now also the guy that Saudi Arabia owns. They've given his family over $3 billion, they and their allies in the Middle East. Over $3 billion to the Trump family in just the last 2 years. So, they've made their investment. They want to see a return on that investment. They want Donald Trump back in the White House. Meanwhile, speaking of Vladimir Putin, he is also apparently, this Chris Hughes reporting at the Mirror, the UK publication. The Kremlin believes, this is from sources inside the Kremlin, inside the Kremlin in Moscow, are reporting to Western intelligence and to news agencies that Vladimir Putin thinks that the best way for him to win the war in Ukraine, to seize all of Ukraine, to destroy a democracy on his border, is for Donald Trump to become president again. Because the United States is not only, the largest supplier of weapons to Ukraine and moral support, but we're also, by doing so, we're establishing the example that the rest of Europe is following, arguably the rest of the world. And this is something that Putin does not want to have happen. Putin wants his man. He wants his boy Trump back in office. Desperately. And this is what he's hanging on to. This is, Chris Hughes calls it, the biggest and possibly most diluted gamble of Putin's war. Yeah, I think that's a reasonable description of it. I mean, Prigozhin is gone now. Putin's in trouble. He's having to buy weapons from North Korea. He's got Kim Jong-un visiting this week. And, you know, he's desperately, I mean, he's running out of ammunition. The Russian factories are running full tilt bore, you know, full bore. But his most successful attacks on Ukraine, his air attacks, are coming from drones that are made in Iran. And now he wants to get missiles and munitions, particularly artillery, from North Korea. Now, my hope on this is that the North Korean munitions will be so poorly made that they will blow up in their guns and things like that, although, you know, it's probably, it's pretty weak sauce. You know, odds are that they won't be. Because if you work in North Korea and you produce a product that is defective, the dear leader will put you to death. And then he'll kill your family. I mean, you know, these autocratic nations, they don't put up with anything. So hang on to your hats. This is going to get wild.